Well, we are back with more Witches by Roald Dahl. I have a question. Do you remember how you can tell if someone is a witch? Well, let me do our quick review, then we'll see if you recall. Our main character is a little boy who now lives with his grandmother because his parents passed away. His grandmother is a wonderful older lady who has great stories to tell him all about witches. Also, she is very knowledgeable and smart on how to identify them and capture them. Well, they live in England, and they took a summer holiday at a hotel in which our main character is walking around the hotel and found the most perfect spot to train his mice. Yes, he has pet mice. Well, he goes into this big ballroom, and then a group of women come in looking like they're about to start a meeting. Well, our main character luckily keeps very quiet because what he finds out is they're all witches. He's in a room full of witches. And do you remember what Grandmama told him what the witches hate most? Children. They want to get rid of all children. Well, luckily he knew the signs to figure out that they were witches. Do you remember them? First, they always wear gloves because their fingers are like claws. Ooh. So even when it's hot outside, they're wearing long gloves. Also, they're always itching their heads because witches are bald and wear wigs to hide it. Their nostrils are super big to smell out little children. Ooh. They also have very odd eyes. You can't see the pupil in the middle. It's just like fire and ice. And lastly, they have no toes. Yes, witches have no toes. Strange, but they're always women who dress normally and look like they can just sneak into regular world, but they're actually horrible creatures called witches. And they are at this meeting to meet the Grand High Witch and plot exactly how they're going to get rid of every child in England. Well, the Grand High Witch is the nastiest and worst of all of them. She is disgusting, terrifying, gross. I won't describe it again for you. But she has an extra special idea to get rid of all the children. She has a potion that doesn't turn the kids right away into something else. It waits a little bit. And they're going to put it in candy. And all of the witches in England are going to buy sweet shops and put them in this candy. And slowly, the next day, every child will turn into a mouse. Uh-oh. Well, our main character is still very quietly sitting in the back of this giant meeting. Let's see what happens next. Chapter 9, The Recipe. I hope you haven't forgotten that while all this was going on, I was still stuck behind the screen on my hands and knees with one eye glued to the crack. I don't know how long I had been there, but it seemed like forever. The worst part of it was not being allowed to cough or make a sound, and knowing that if I did, I was as good as dead. And all the way through, I was living in constant terror that one of the witches in the back row was going to get a whiff of my presence through those special nose holes of theirs. My only hope, as I saw it, was the fact that I hadn't washed for days. That and the never-ending excitement and clapping and shouting that was going on in the room. The witches were thinking of nothing except the Grand High Witch. up there on the platform and her grand plan for wiping out all of the children of England. They certainly weren't sniffing around for a child in the room. In their wildest dreams, if witches had dreams, that would never have occurred to any of them. I kept still and prayed. The Grand High Witch's dreadful gloating song was over now, and the audience was clapping madly and shouting, "Brilliant! Sensational! Marvelous! You're a genius! Oh, brainy one! It is a thrilling invention, this delayed action mouse maker! It's a winner! And the beauty of it is that the teachers will be the ones bumping off the stinking little children. It won't be us doing it. We shall never be caught." "Witches are never caught," snapped the Grand High Witch. "Attention now! I want everybody's attention, for I am about to be telling you what you must do to prepare Formula 86 Delayed Action Mouse Maker." Suddenly, there was a great gasp from the audience. This was followed by a hubbub of shrieking and yelling, and I saw many of the witches leaping onto their feet and pointing at the platform and crying out, "Mice! Mice! She's done it to show us! The brainy one has turned 2 children into mice, and here they are!" I looked toward the platform. The mice were there all right, 2 of them, running around near the Grand High Witch's skirts. But these were not field mice or house mice or wood mice or harvest mice. These were white mice. I recognized them immediately as my own little William and Mary. "Mice!" shouted the audience. "Our leader has made mice to appear out of nowhere. Get the mouse traps, fetch the cheese." I saw the Grand High Witch peering down at the floor and staring with obvious puzzlement at William and Mary. She bent lower to get a closer look. Then she straightened up and shouted, "Quiet!" The audience became silent and sat down. "These mice are nothing to do with me," she shouted. "These mice are pet mice. These mice are quite obviously belonging to some repellent little child in the hotel. A boy it will be for certainly, because girls are not keeping pet mice." "A boy!" cried the witches. "A filthy, smelly little boy. We'll wipe him, we'll swizzle him, we'll have his stripes for breakfast." "Silence!" shouted the Grand High Witch, raising her hands. "You know perfectly well you must do nothing to draw attention to yourselves while we are living in the hotel. Let us by all means get rid of this evil-smelling little squirt, but we must do it as quietly as possible, for we are not all of us most respectable ladies of the Royal Society for Preservation of Cruelty to Children." "What do you suggest then, oh brainy one?" they cried out. "How shall we dispose of this small pile of filth?" They were talking about me, I thought. These females are actually talking about how to kill me. I began to sweat. "Whoever he is not important," announced the Grand High Witch. "Leave him to me. I shall smell him out and turn him into a mackerel and have him dished up for supper." "Bravo!" cried the witches. "Cut off his head and chop off his tail and fry him in hot butter." You can imagine that none of this was making me feel very comfortable. William and Mary were still running around the platform, and I saw the Grand High Witch aim a swift kick at William. She caught him right at the point of her toe and sent him flying. She did the same to Mary. Her aim was extraordinary. She would have made a great football player. Both mice crashed against the wall. For a few minutes they lay stunned. Then they got to their feet and scampered away. "Attention again!" the Grand High Witch was shouting. "I will now give you the recipe for concocting Formula 86 Delayed Action Mouse Maker. Get out pencils and paper." Handbags were opened all over the room, and notebooks were fished out. "Give us the recipe, oh brainy one!" cried the audience impatiently. "Tell us the secret!" "First," said the Grand High Witch, "I had to find something that would cause the children to become very small very quickly." "And what was that?" cried the audience. "That part was simple," said the Grand High Witch. "All you have to do is, if you are wishing to make a child very small, is to look at him through the wrong end of a telescope." "She's a wonder!" cried the audience. "Who else would have thought of a thing like that?" "So, you take the wrong end of a telescope," continued the Grand High Witch, "and you boil it until it gets soft." "How long does it take?" they asked her. 21 hours of boiling," answered the Grand High Witch. "And while this is going on, you take exactly 45 brown mice and you chop off their tails with a carving knife, and you fry the tails in hair oil until they are nice and crisp." "What do we do with all those mice who've had their tails chopped off?" asked the audience. "You simmer them with frog juice for 1 hour, came the answer. "But listen to me. So far, I've only given you the easy part of the recipe. The really difficult problem is to put in something that will have a genuine delayed action result. Something that can be eaten by children on a certain day, but which will not start working on them until 9 o'clock the next morning when they arrive at school." "What did you come up with, oh brainy one?" they called out. "Tell us the great secret." "The secret," announced the Grand High Witch triumphantly, "is an alarm clock." "An alarm clock!" they cried. "It's a stroke of genius." "Of course it is," said the Grand High Witch. "You can set a 24-hour alarm clock today, and at exactly 9 o'clock tomorrow, it will go off." "But we will need 5 million alarm clocks," cried the audience. "We will need one for each child." "Idiots!" shouted the Grand High Witch. "If you are wanting a steak, you do not cook the whole cow. It is the same with alarm clocks. 1 clock will make enough for 1,000 children. Here is what you do. You set your alarm clock to go off at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. Then you roast it in the oven until it is crisp and tender. Are you writing this down?" "We are, your grandness, we are," they cried. "Next," said the Grand High Witch, "you take your boiled telescope and your fried mouse tails and your cooked mice and your roasted alarm clock, and all together you put them in the mixer. Then you mix them at full speed. This will give you some nice thick paste. While the mixer is still mixing, you must add it to the yolk of 1 Gruntle's egg." "A Gruntle's egg!" cried the audience. "We shall do that." Underneath all the clamor that was going on, I heard one witch in the back row saying to her neighbor, "I'm getting a bit old to go in birds' nesting. Those ruddy Gruntles always nest so very high up." "So you mix an egg," the Grand High Witch went on, "and one after another you also mix in the following items: the claw of the Crumble Cruncher, the beak of the Blabber Snitch, the snout of the Globble Spat, and the tongue of a Cut Springer. I trust you are not having any trouble finding those." "None at all," they cried out. "We will spear the Blabber Snitch and trap the Crab Cruncher and shoot the Gobble Squirt and catch the Cat Springer in his burrow." "Excellent," said the Grand High Witch. "Then you have mixed everything together. In the mixer, you will have the most marvelous looking green liquid. Put 1 drop, just one itsy teensy droplet of this liquid in a chocolate or sweet, and at 9 o'clock the next morning, the child who ate it will turn into a mouse in 26 seconds. But one word of warning. Never increase the dose. Never put more than 1 drop into each sweet or chocolate, and never give more than 1 sweet or chocolate to each child. An overdose of delayed action mouse maker will mess up the timing of the alarm clock and cause the child to turn into a mouse too early. A large overdose might even have an instant effect. And you wouldn't want that, would you? You wouldn't want the children turning into mice right there in your sweet shops? That would give the game away. So be very careful. Do not overdose. Chapter 10. Bruno Jenkins disappears. The Grand High Witch was starting to talk again. I am now going to prove to you, she said, that this recipe is working to perfection. You understand, of course, that you can set the alarm clock to go off at any time you like. It does not have to be 9 o'clock. So yesterday, I am personally preparing a small quantity of the magic formula in order to give you a public demonstration. But I am making one small change in the recipe. Before I am roasting the alarm clock, I am setting it to go off, not at 9 o'clock the next morning, but 3:30 in the afternoon, which means 3:30 this afternoon. And that, she said, glancing at her wristwatch, is in precisely 7 minutes' time. The audience of witches was listening intently, sensing that something dramatic was about to happen. So what am I doing yesterday with this magic liquid? Asked the Grand High Witch. I will tell you what I am doing. I am putting 1 droplet of it into a very squishy chocolate bar, and I'm giving this bar to a repulsive, smelly little boy who's hanging around the lobby of the hotel. The Grand High Witch paused. The audience remained silent, waiting for her to go on. I watched this repulsive little brute gobbling up the squishy bar of chocolate. And when he had finished, I said to him, "Was that good?" He said it was great. So I said to him, "Would you like some more?" And he said, "Yes." So I said, "I will give you 6 more chocolate bars like that if you will meet me in the ballroom of this hotel at 3:25 tomorrow afternoon." 6 bars, cried this greedy little swine. I'll be there. You bet I'll be there. So, the stage is set, shouted the Grand High Witch. The proof of the pudding is about to begin. Do not forget that before I am roasting the alarm clock yesterday, I am setting it for 3:30 today. It is now, she glanced again at her watch, it is now exactly 25 minutes past 3, and the nasty little stinker, who will be turning into a mouse in 5 minutes' time, should at this very moment be standing outside the doors. And, by gum, she was absolutely right. The boy, whoever he might be, was already rattling the door handle and banging on the doors with his fist. "Quick!" shrieked the Grand High Witch. "Put on your wigs! Put on your gloves! Put on your shoes!" There was a great rustle and bustle of putting on the wigs and gloves and shoes, and I saw the Grand High Witch herself reach for her face mask and put it on over her revolting face of hers. It was astonishing how that mask transformed her. All of a sudden she became once again a rather pretty young lady. "Let me in!" came the boy's voice from behind the doors. "Where are those chocolate bars you promised me? I'm here to collect. Dish them out." "He is not only smelly, "He is also greedy," said the Grand High Witch. "Remove the chains from the doors and let him come in." The extraordinary thing about the mask was that its lips moved quite naturally when she spoke. You really couldn't see that it was a mask at all. One of the witches leapt to her feet and unfastened the chains. She opened the 2 huge doors. Then I heard her saying, "Why, hello, little man. How lovely to see you. You have come for your chocolate bars, have you not? They are ready for you. Do come in." A small boy wearing a white t-shirt and gray shorts and gym shoes entered the room. I recognized him at once. He was called Bruno Jenkins, and he was staying in the hotel with his parents. I didn't care for him. He was one of those boys who was always eating something whenever you met him. Meet him in the hotel lobby and he's stuffing sponge cake into his mouth. Pass him in the corridor and he is fishing potato crisps out of a bag by the fistful. Catch sight of him in the hotel garden and he's wolfing a dairy milk bar and has 2 more sticking out of his trouser pocket. What's more, Bruno never stopped boasting about how his father made more money than my father and that they owned 3 cars. But worse than that, yesterday morning, I had found him kneeling on the flagstones of the hotel entrance with a magnifying glass in hand. There was a column of ants marching across the flagstones, and Bruno Jenkins was focusing the sun through his magnifying glass and roasting the ants one by one. "I like watching them burn," he said. "That's horrible," I cried. "Stop doing it." "Let's see you stop me," he said. At that point, I had pushed him with all my might, and he had crashed sideways into the flagstones. His magnifying glass had splintered into many pieces, and he leapt up shrieking, "My father is going to get you for this!" Then he had run off, presumably to find his wealthy dad. That was the last time I'd seen Bruno Jenkins until now. I doubted very much that he was about to be turned into a mouse, although I must confess I was secretly hoping it might happen. Either way, I didn't envy him for being up in front of all those witches. "Darling boy," cooed the Grand High Witch from up on the platform, "I have your chocolates all ready for you. Do come up here first and say hello to all these lovely ladies." Her voice was quite different now. It was soft and gentle and absolutely dripping with syrup. Bruno was looking a bit bewildered, but he allowed himself to be led up to the platform, where he stood beside the Grand High Witch, and said, "Okay, where are my 6 bars of chocolate?" I saw the witch who had led him in quietly putting the chain back on the door handles. Bruno didn't notice this. He was too busy asking for his chocolate. "The time is now 1 minute before 3:30, announced the Grand High Witch. "What the heck is going on?" Bruno asked. He wasn't frightened, but he wasn't looking exactly comfortable anyway. "What is this?" he said. "Give me my chocolate." "30 seconds to go!" cried the Grand High Witch, gripping Bruno by the arm. Bruno shook himself clear and stared at her. She stared back at him, smiling with the lips of her mask. Every witch in the audience was staring at Bruno. 20 seconds! "Give me the chocolate!" shouted Bruno, becoming suddenly suspicious. "Give me the chocolate and let me out of here!" 15 seconds! cried the Grand High Witch. "Will one of you crazy punks kindly tell me what this is all about?" shouted Bruno. 10 seconds! cried the Grand High Witch. 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. We have ignition. I could have sworn I heard an alarm clock ringing. I saw Bruno jump. He jumped as though someone had stuck a hat pin deep into his bottom, and he yelled, "Ow!" He jumped so high that he landed on a table up there on the stage, and he started hopping about on the table, waving his arms and yelling his head off. Then suddenly he became silent. His whole body stiffened. "The alarm has gone off!" shrieked the Grand High Witch. "The mouse maker is beginning to work!" She started hopping about on the platform and clapping her gloved hands together, and then she shouted out, "This smelly brat, this filthy scum, this horrid little louse will very, very soon become a lovely little mouse." Bruno was getting smaller and smaller by the second. I could see him shrinking. Now his clothes seemed to be disappearing, and brown fur was growing all over his body. Suddenly, he had a tail. And then he had whiskers. Now he had 4 feet. It was all happening so quickly. It was a matter of seconds only, and all at once he wasn't there anymore. A small brown mouse was running around on top of the tabletop. "Bravo!" yelled the audience. "She's done it! It works! It's fantastic! It's colossal! It's the greatest yet! You're a miracle, oh brainy one!" They were all standing up and clapping and cheering. The Grand High Witch produced a mouse trap from the folds of her dress and started to set it. "Oh no," I thought. "I don't want to see this. Bruno Jenkins may have been a bit of a stinker, but I'm dashed if I want to watch him getting his head chopped off." "Where is he?" snapped the Grand High Witch, searching the platform. "Where has that mouse got to?" She couldn't find him. Clever Bruno must have jumped down off the table and scampered off some corner or even down a small hole. Thank heavens for that. "It matters not," shouted the Grand High Witch. "Silence and sit down." Chapter 11. The Ancient Ones. The Grand High Witch stood on the very center of the platform, and those dangerous eyes of hers traveled slowly around the audience of witches who were sitting so meekly before her. "All those over 70, put up your hands!" she barked suddenly. 7 or 8 hands went into the air. "It comes to me," the Grand High Witch said, "that you ancient ones will not be able to climb the high trees in search of Gruntle's eggs." "We won't, your grandness. We are afraid we won't," chanted the ancient ones. "Nor will you be able to catch the crab cruncher who lives high up on the rocky cliffs," the Grand High Witch went on. "I can't exactly see you spring after the speedy cat springer either, or diving into deep waters to spear the blabbersnitch, or striding the bleak moors with a gun under your arm to shoot the glabbersquirt. You are too old and feeble for these things." "We are," chanted the ancient ones. "We are, we are." "You ancient ones have served me well over many years," the Grand High Witch said, "and I do not wish to deny you the pleasure of bumping off a few thousand children each because you have become old and feeble. I have therefore prepared personally with my own hands a limited quantity of delayed action mouse maker, which I will distribute to the ancient ones before you leave the hotel." "Oh, thank you," cried the old witches. "You are far too good to us, your grandness. You are so kind and thoughtful." "Here is a sample of what I am giving you," shouted the Grand High Witch. She fished around in her pocket of her dress and brought out a very small bottle. She held it up and shouted, "In this tiny bottle is 500 doses of mouse maker. It is enough to turn 500 children into mice." I could see that the bottle was made of dark blue glass, and that it was very small, about the same size as the ones you can buy at the chemist with nose drops in them. "Each one of you ancient ones will get 2 of these bottles," she shouted. Thank you, oh most generous and thoughtful one," chorused the ancient witches. "Not one drop will be wasted. Each of us will promise to squish and squallop and squiggle 1,000 children." "Our meeting is over," announced the Grand High Witch. "Here is a timetable for the remainder of your stay in this hotel.
Right now, we must all go out to the Sunshine Terrace and have tea with that ridiculous manager. Next, at 6 o'clock tonight, those witches who are too old to climb trees after Granto's eggs will report to my room to receive 2 bottles of mouse maker. My room is number 454. Do not forget it. Then, at 8 o'clock, all of you will assemble in the dining room for supper. We are the lovely ladies of the RSPCC, and they will set up 2 long tables specially for us. But do not forget to put the cotton plugs up your noses. The dining room will be full of filthy little children, and without the nose plugs, the stink will be unbearable. Apart from that, remember to behave normally at all times. Is everything clear? Any questions?
I have one question, your grandness, said a voice from the audience. What happens if one of the chocolates we are giving away at your shops gets eaten by a grown-up?
Then it's too bad for the grown-up, said the Grand High Witch. This meeting is over, she shouted. Out you go.
The witches stood up and began gathering their things together. I was watching them through the crack and hoping to heaven they would hurry up and leave so they might get out here safe at last.
Wait!
Shrieked one of the witches in the back row.
Hold everything!
Her shrieking voice echoed through the ballroom like a trumpet. All the witches suddenly stopped and turned and looked towards the speaker. She was one of the taller witches, and I could see her standing there with her head tilted back and her nose in the air, and she was sucking in great long breaths of air through those curvy pink seashell nostrils of hers.
Wait!
She shouted again.
What is it? The others cried out. Dog's droppings, she yelled. Just then I got a whiff of dog's droppings.
Surely not, the others shouted. There couldn't be.
Yes, yes, shouted the first witch. There it is again. It's not strong, but it's there. I mean it's there. It's definitely somewhere not too far away. What is going on down there? Shouted the Grand High Witch, glaring down from the platform.
Mildred's just got a whiff of dog's droppings, your grandness, someone called back to her.
What rubbish is this? Shouted the Grand High Witch. She has dog's droppings on her brain. There are no children in this room. Hang on, cried the witch called Mildred. Hang on, everybody. Don't move. I'm getting it again.
Her huge, curvy nose holes were waving out in the air like fish tails.
It's getting stronger. It's hitting me harder now. Can't the rest of you smell this?
All the noses of all the witches in the room went up into the air, and all the nostrils began to suck and sniff.
She's right, cried another voice. She's absolutely right. Dog droppings it is, strong and foul.
In a matter of seconds, the entire assembly of witches had taken up the dreaded cry of dog's droppings.
Dog droppings, they shouted. The room is full of it. Pooh, 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 pooh. Why didn't we not smell it before? It stinks like a sewer. Some little swine must be hiding not too far away from here. Find it! Screamed the Grand High Witch. Track it down! Root it out! Follow your noses till you get it!
The hairs on my head were standing up like the bristles of a nail brush, and cold sweat was breaking out all over me.
Rootle it out, this small lump of a dung! Screeched the Grand High Witch. Don't let it escape! If it is in here, it has observed the most secret things. It must be exterminated immediately!
That is not a good place to leave our main character, is it? But I would like to talk to you about our chapters. In Chapter 9, The Recipe, why did our main character feel that he might be safe from the witches since he hasn't taken a bath in a while? So his grandmama told him that the witches can only smell clean kids, so he's not supposed to take a bath very often. Don't think
That is what we should do in real life, though. All right.
So they talk about the recipe for this mouse maker scary potion, right? Let's see. What was in the potion? Can you remember? There were lots of ingredients. The first one, she says, is the end of a telescope. So the back end of a telescope. They have to boil it. Also, mouse tails. Ugh. And mice in general. And simmer them in frog juice. Also, a gruntle's egg. I don't think I know what that is. A claw of a crab cruncher. A beak of a blabber snitch. And the tongue of a cat springer. Eesh. Oh, and the snout of a grubble squirt. It's a lot of things. And they put it all together and mix it up. They put 1 drop into the chocolate. And then the kids turn into mice. Not good. Oh, I forgot the most important ingredient. How do they make it so it only happens at a certain time? So it doesn't happen right away. An alarm clock. Must be how their magic works. All right. Our next chapter was Bruno Jenkins disappears. What did you think was going to happen to Bruno at the beginning of the chapter? I had a feeling that kid was going to definitely turn into a mouse. He was kind of rude. He took chocolate from the Grand High Witch. What did you expect, right? How do you think our main character felt while he was watching Bruno walking up to the front of the room with all of those witches? I would have been terrified. Our main character talked about how, Bruno wasn't really a nice kid, but he doesn't want to see him get turned into a mouse. And he knows that all of those witches are after kids. And they really don't like Bruno. So, our last chapter was called The Ancient Ones. If you were a witch, would you want to have to climb trees and cliffs or dive into deep waters to find all of the things for your potion? I don't think so. I think I'd prefer to be a witch in Harry Potter times and you just go to the store. These witches have to work a lot harder. Nah, probably fine. Now, the witches smelled something at the end of our chapter, didn't they? They finally smelled our main character. He's been sitting in the back of that room this whole time. And they sniffed him out with their giant nostrils. What do you think is going to happen to him? I don't know. But we're going to have to wait till next time. So, I hope you can join us again with our next chapter book read along of Witches. Bye, everyone.